Hello, friends. Welcome to a new episode of That Fertile Feeling, the podcast. My name is Françoise, and as you can see, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's summer in the Netherlands, and it's so hot in the room where I'm recording. So I'm quite flushed, but also happy that summer is here and feeling that good summer energy. And I'm using all of that energy today to talk to you about a little bit of a different topic than I usually cover. Because if you've listened to the show before, you know that my focus is generally on doing less when it comes to supporting your fertility. So I want to get you out of that fear-driven mindset, that masculine mindset where you feel like you need to work really hard to get pregnant, where you need to be doing all of these things. And instead, I really focus on, how you can start listening more to your intuition, to that feeling of surrender and receptivity. But there's a big but here. There are some basic things I feel that anyone who's trying to conceive should be doing. Um, and getting rid of chemicals in your environment is one of them. This is like a baseline thing that anyone should be doing when they're trying to conceive. Not only because these chemicals harm your fertility, harm your overall health, but also because they can cause serious harm to your baby when you do get pregnant. This is something that you pass on to the next generation. Just so you have a point of reference on how widespread the chemical transfer is, the Environmental Working Group, that's a non-profit organization that specializes in toxic chemicals. They identified over 200 industrial compounds and pollutants in samples of newborn babies' umbilical cord blood. So that's a really big thing, that chemical transfer that happens between mothers and their babies. And we know that these chemicals are very harmful for your fertility as well. So on this episode of the podcast, a little bit different than usual, I will talk about these chemicals. They're called endocrine disrupting chemicals. I will talk about what they are, what they do, and how and where you should be removing them from your environment. And now I've summarized all of this information in an easily downloadable PDF file that you can find on my website. So if you go to thatfertilefeeling.com/chemicals, there's this PDF. There's 4 areas or categories of changes that you can adopt to, really clean up your house and your life. Also good to mention that some of the information in this podcast comes from the book It Starts with the Egg by Rebecca Fett, which is a really good resource. So I'll put that in the show notes for you as well. But if you don't have time to read another book, go to the PDF. It will tell you anything that you need to know. I need to make a disclaimer before we start. When it comes to fertility, when it comes to these chemicals, don't make perfection the enemy of good. And that is in line with my general message for the show. So, there's always that pitfall that we get stuck in our doing mode. And now, especially when it comes to these endocrine disrupting chemicals, it can be really scary when you first learn about this stuff. And even for me, I've known about this for a while. It just doesn't make any sense to me that we're all using these harmful products without anyone telling us how dangerous they are for our health, for our fertility. And I'm always on the lookout for them. But, the research also shows that simply lowering your exposure to these chemicals can already make a world of difference. So you don't need to try to eliminate them altogether because that's really impossible. They are virtually everywhere. But with the things that I mentioned on the show, there are certainly things that you can do to really limit your exposure to these chemicals. So, what are endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs? That's what I will call them now on this episode. EDCs are chemicals that disrupt your hormonal balance. And last month, I recorded 5 podcast episodes on the different phases of your cycle and what happens hormonally during each phase. So, if you listen to any of those, you'll probably remember that hormones are messengers that help your brain communicate with your organs, with your glands. The best example is that when you hit puberty, your hypothalamus, your brain's central command station, it communicates to the pituitary gland in your brain that it's time to start producing eggs. And then that pituitary gland, in return, it starts producing FSH and LH, so these 2 hormones that signal to your ovaries that they need to start producing and releasing eggs. It's a really intricate system. All of these messages, they're interlinked. This is where those EDCs come in, the endocrine disruptive chemicals. Um, The thing with them is that they look like your body's natural hormones, but they are not the same thing. So your body, when it detects certain EDCs in your blood or in the glands, it may think that it's already producing enough estrogen, for example, because that's the signal that the body is getting from the receptors. But what these receptors are really picking up on are the EDCs. And then as a consequence, your body stops producing estrogen. And that obviously interferes with your fertility because the body is not getting the right type of hormones. So these EDCs, they may send out wrong signals or they may obstruct certain functions of your body. So they really mess with your hormones. And what we're looking at right now, so I found a study published in Environmental Science and Technology a couple of years ago, February 2020. That study estimated that the total number of chemicals on the global market may exceed 350,000. And of those 350,000 chemicals that are out there that are being used in all sorts of technology, at least 1,000 of these chemicals have been identified as endocrine disruptors. So these hormonal mimickers, really. And that's what we currently know. So there might be so many others out there that we don't even know of. And this is really the world that we live in. Now we are surrounded by this chemical burden that's interfering with our hormones, with our fertility. And that's something that you need to take into account when you're trying to conceive. Now, out of all of those harmful chemicals that are out there, I'll quickly zoom in on the three most notorious ones and what they do to your fertility. So a first chemical to be on the lookout for is bisphenol A, also BPA. This is a compound that's commonly found in plastic, also in canned goods. And we know how harmful BPAs are for your fertility because of the work of Dr. Patricia Hunt. She's a researcher who used laboratory mice to study egg development, and she found something unusual in August 1998. In her lab, she found that there was a dramatic increase in the number of chromosomally abnormal eggs. Typically, she would have between 1 and 2% of eggs that were abnormal, but this number suddenly rose to 40%. And after thoroughly investigating this, the researchers found that BPA, so that chemical, had started leaking out of the plastic cages and water bottles after they were washed with detergent. So, they were just doing their normal cleaning process, cleaning the cages, cleaning the water bottles, but that made that chemical, the BPA, started to leak out into the water, into the cages as well. Now, once that damaged plastic was replaced, the rate of eggs with chromosomal errors began to return to normal. And subsequent studies also confirmed that this was because of the BPA that these mice were exposed to. Now, this was just the beginning of what research has found about the link between BPA and fertility. Subsequent studies have shown that women with high levels of BPA in their system during an IVF cycle, they end up with fewer embryos to transfer, they were less likely to become pregnant. We know from research that BPA also impacts the ovarian response to IVF stimulation medication, so women will have less follicles because of the BPA that they're exposed to. There's also a link between BPA concentration in women and the failure of embryos to implant. Also, and I think this figure blows my mind, but the high levels of BPA seem to increase the risk of miscarriage, with women who have the highest levels of BPA in their blood having an 83% increased risk of miscarriage during the first trimester. So obviously, you don't want to be exposed to BPA, especially when you're trying to conceive. Now, at the end of this podcast, I will provide you with an overview on how to prevent exposure to BPA, to all of the other chemicals that I mentioned. But one thing I wanted to mention now is that many manufacturers are now starting to replace BPA with very closely related chemicals. So there's BPA stands for bisphenol A, and now you see things like bisphenol S, bisphenol F being used. But we don't know, because this hasn't been studied, what the effects of these chemicals are. So it's nice messaging from the manufacturers saying, okay, this bottle is BPA free, but maybe then there's BPS or BPF in there. So it might be better, and that's what I'll get at, during my recommendations. It might be better to just minimize your use of plastic products and canned foods altogether. So that's BPA, the first chemical I wanted to talk about. A second chemical I wanted to mention are phthalates, and you write that PHTHALATES, but you pronounce it phthalates. These are substances that are added to plastic, and it helps to increase their flexibility, their transparency, their durability, their longevity. So you can really see why manufacturers would want to work with phthalates. But once again, there's research on rodents that show that giving rats a high dose of particular phthalate will make them stop ovulating, and it also compromises egg development. Higher levels of phthalates have also been found in women with endometriosis. So there's one study by the National Institute of Health of the University of Utah that found that higher phthalate levels were associated with a twofold increase in the rate of endometriosis. Other studies have also found a link between phthalate exposure and anovulation, so that means not ovulating, and with PCOS as well. So this is, when it comes to your fertility. As a woman, I'm assuming you're a woman. There's also research conducted by Shauna Swan, who's a really big name in the field that studies the link between chemicals and fertility. I actually got to interview her for an article I'm writing for a newspaper. She is impressive. She's 80 years old. She's working with this Oscar award-winning documentary maker right now to create a series about this for Netflix. She's been featured in all the major newspapers. She is a powerhouse. The reason why she's so famous is because her studies show that male sperm concentrations have more than halved over the last 3 decades. I recently recorded a podcast episode about this as well. Now, what she also shows is that phthalates are partly to blame for that. And I think this is the most, so your partner needs to know this. This episode is not just for you, it's also for your partner, because all of these things, all of these chemicals, they're not just affecting you, they're affecting your partner as well. But what Swan's research showed is that once you get pregnant, the EDCs in your system, they also have an effect on the development of your unborn child. So when it comes to the development of your baby's sex organs, that usually happens between week 8 and week 12 of your pregnancy. So that is at the end of the first trimester. And this process is hormonally driven. Now, if the mother's body contains these EDCs that, for example, that look like testosterone, that will signal to your baby boy's system that it needs to produce less testosterone than it actually needs for organ development. And then what you see in the babies once they are born is that they have micro penises, so really, really tiny penises. You see that their testicles have not descended. When they get older, they have a lower sperm count. So this really messes with their anatomy and with their reproductive function. For baby girls, the research suggests that exposure to EDCs may lead to them growing up having earlier periods. It has a negative impact on their ovarian function, so they might have fewer eggs when they grow up. So all to say that these EDCs are not only messing with your own reproductive system, but with your offsprings as well. And that is why it's so important to clean up your environment when you're trying to conceive. So I mentioned BPA, phthalates, and then a final EDC to look out for are PFAS. So that's per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. In any case, these are substances that are water, grease, and dirt repellent. They are found in various products, lubricants, food packaging materials, extinguishing foam, non-stick coatings on pans, clothing, textiles, cosmetics. It's spelled PFAS, so I think it's pronounced PFAS. At this point, I've probably convinced you of the harmful effects of these EDCs on fertility, so I will not go over all of the harmful effects that PFAS or PFAS have. But again, I just wanted to mention that there are lots of studies out there that also show that, again, maternal exposure to this chemical has a negative effect on the sperm quality of their sons. So again, this is a chemical that not only affects your own reproductive function, but also, it's also passed on to the next generation. And this is a chemical that's so pervasive. It's found in groundwater, in fish, because they swim in contaminated water. One of my former colleagues, she just moved to the countryside and she got a couple of chickens. She has a young daughter, so she thought it would be really great to have chickens. have freshly laid eggs. But she did decide to get these eggs tested just to know if they were safe enough to eat. And the level of PFAS that was detected in these eggs was 9 times higher than food regulations allow for. So, just an example that shows that we're exposed to this on such a wide scale. And again, it can be really scary once you know this. But I also feel it's really a call to action to be very, very precise about what you allow into your home and to also vote with your money, really, because by deciding not to buy things that contain PFAS, we're giving a very clear signal to the industry that something needs to change. So, my tiny rant. Um, On to what you can do to clean up your home. There's so much you can do, and I want to keep it manageable for you, because again, you don't want to make perfection the enemy of the good. So I've created this PDF for you, and it contains 4 basic steps. The first one is actually quite straightforward. Clean the air that you breathe. Because we are exposed to many toxicants from indoor air, both at home and at work. And now, luckily, it's very easy to improve air quality. So, it's the air that you breathe inside. And this is something that you can really turn into a priority. Opening your windows daily, vacuum frequently, and also making sure that you dust with a damp cloth. So you really get all of those particles from the different surfaces in your home so they don't become airborne. Make sure that you have a doormat at all entrances and take off your shoes indoors because, again, a lot of this pollution is out there, it's everywhere, and you bring it into your home under your feet, on your shoes. So just take your shoes off, leave them at the doormat. During cooking, after cooking, ventilate air. So use an exhaust hood and open a window if possible. And also make sure to clean the filters in your heating, your ventilation, and air conditioning units regularly. So these are just basic things about keeping, good quality air in your home. You can also use plants, by the way, to improve indoor air quality. One important thing when it comes to products that you use, minimize your use of scented candles and synthetic fragrances. Anything, just keep that as a rule of thumb. Anything that's scented is a no-go unless it's scented with, natural essential oils. Anything else, it's toxic, which, blows my mind, but you can just buy it in the supermarket, don't use it. So that's all quite straightforward, I feel. The second step is to be mindful of the food that you eat. Now, this one is a bit more tricky because there are so many ways in which our food is contaminated, and I want to keep this manageable for you. So see which changes are easiest for you to make again. Think, where can I get started? With regards to your food, you want to be mindful of anything that's been in contact with plastic, especially plastic that's being heated. So food packaging is not the enemy here necessarily, but plastic takeout containers are, for example, because those are being heated. So be mindful of plastic, anything that is non-stick, anything that is canned, and anything that is processed. And now you see, like, this is actually probably like 75% of your food, right? Processed foods and fast foods are often contaminated during the production process. Factories and restaurants, they make extensive use of plastic containers and processing equipment. So, and then that's often washed with scalding hot water as well to get rid of all the bacteria. But that's how these chemicals start leaking out. So, yeah, let me repeat that. Look out for plastic, for non-stick, for canned and processed foods. If you want to introduce changes in your home, the first step is to make sure that you just make more meals at home. If it's, if it fits within your budget, you would preferably choose organic fruits and vegetables and organic pastured animal products whenever possible. One tip I got from a medical doctor was to use frozen organic vegetables because they're cheaper, A, but B, they've also been checked before they, went into the shops, whereas normal fruits and vegetables obviously aren't always checked. You also want to prepare and store your meals without plastics. And again, put the focus here on plastics that are being heated. So things you could replace when it comes to plastics, you could replace them for glass or stainless steel. So you can, invest in reusable food storage containers. microwave safe bowls made from glass or stainless steel. No, not stainless steel, from glass. Um, you want to replace reusable plastic water bottles and cups with glass or stainless steel bottles. Also look at your tea kettle. It can usually they're made from plastic, and there are glass options out there. Colanders, blender containers that you use with hot soup. Those are all things that can start leaking these chemicals when you heat them. When it comes to non-stick items, use stainless steel and cast iron cookware instead of non-stick pans. Use silicone baking tray sheets rather than the ones you buy in the store. You can make your own popcorn instead of using those microwave bags. Again, this is quite an exhaustive list, so see what's manageable for you, right? And then a final note on canned foods. Historically, canned foods have been one of the highest sources of BPA exposure because they have these linings inside, and there's BPA in these linings. Now, some manufacturers have switched to BPA-free can linings, but we don't know what alternatives they use. So that's why it's better to steer clear from canned food altogether, but not always possible. So the most important food to avoid are tomatoes, which is unfortunate because I love cooking with canned tomatoes. But because they're so acid, that actually contributes to the breakdown of the lining and the release of these chemicals. So things like canned beans are less problematic, for example. So food, switch out your plastics, your non-stick items, try to cook as many meals as possible at home, use fresh produce, preferably organic, and steer clear from canned foods. Then there's the third area, skincare products and cleaning supplies. I just put these two together. Be mindful of the skincare products and the cleaning supplies that you use. And the general rule of thumb here is just to select more natural alternatives. So if your household products can only be used while wearing gloves, I mean, that's a big red flag, right? And because these chemicals are also airborne, even if you're just using them to clean with gloves, they may still get absorbed in the air and you will breathe them into your system. So that's where you really want to start looking out for more natural alternatives. I mentioned this before, but also avoid anything with the word fragrance in the list of ingredients. So when it comes to skincare, hair care, air fresheners, cleaning sprays, laundry detergent, fabric softener, anything that's not scented with natural essential oils is problematic. Cleanliness has no smell. Keep that in mind. Cleanliness has no smell. When it comes to your cosmetics, the worst offenders are nail polish. I really haven't found a clean option yet, unfortunately. Perfume is a big one, and hairspray. Body lotion is also something to look out for because it's usually applied over a large surface area of skin. Now, what I do, in the Netherlands, there's an app, INCI Beauty app. I can put it in the show notes as well. And I just look up my personal care products there. If you're in the US, you can also look at the Environmental Working Group's Skin Deep Database. They don't have that many products that are on the market here in the Netherlands. So you will have to find out for your own country, but this information is available online once you start looking for it. But generally, more natural is better. Then strictly, these are not skincare products and cleaning supplies, but when you're cleaning out your bathroom, also replace your PVC shower curtains. If you use a PVC yoga mat, also find a cleaner alternative because PVC contains many of these chemicals. So you want to limit your exposure to PVC as well. And I'm also throwing clothes in here because I didn't know in what other category to put them. So make sure you wash your new clothes before wearing them because of chemical exposure during the production process. Watch out, when you're buying water repellent gear, there are PFAS-free alternatives out there. So that's something you can look into. So skincare, I just summarized it. Cleanliness has no smell, more natural, more better. Then the fourth and final thing you can do, this is actually a positive one, increase your detoxification capacity. This actually comes from a podcast episode that I will publish, I think, in 2 weeks' time. So I did an interview with author Alexandria DeVito on her book, 9 Months is Not Enough, which is a book about preconception preparation. So she has many chapters on what you can do to improve your fertility. And she has a whole chapter on cleaning up your environment as well. I've used some of her points in preparation for this episode, giving her a little bit of credit here. So Alexandria DeVito, 9 Months is Not Enough. I think her book is available in all bookstores. I'll put it in the show notes as well. Now, one thing that she stresses is that next to cleaning up your environment, you can also really work on increasing your detoxification capacity as well. We eliminate toxins from our body through urine, through our stool, sweat, breath. So making sure that you're eliminating regularly, that you have optimal liver function is really key in increasing your detoxification capacity. Maybe getting a sauna every now and then. If you're a woman, men should avoid it because of sperm quality. But I got really excited when we were discussing this during our podcast interview because these are actually things that the abdominal therapy that I practice also support you with. If you haven't listened to any of my episodes on abdominal therapy before, this is a form of belly massage that improves blood flow to your pelvic organs and your intestines and liver. And the blood flow helps flush out the toxins and improves the functioning of these organs. And I already knew that this was really key in maintaining an optimal hormonal equilibrium because, those flows also help you regulate your hormones. But something that really clicked for me during that conversation with Alexandria is that this can also really support you with the elimination of these EDCs. And that's probably also one of the reasons why many women with fertility issues or endometriosis or PCOS see a real improvement in their symptoms once they start doing this abdominal massage. So just a quick, I'm getting sidetracked a little bit here, but if you're interested in learning more about abdominal therapy, you can find more information on thatfertilefeeling.com/abdominal-therapy. I'll put a link in the show notes as well. I offer an online session. It takes about an hour where I walk you through your own medical history. We design a protocol for you, and then I teach you the abdominal massage techniques that you can use to support your menstrual, hormonal, and reproductive health, and that also support your detoxification. I find it really empowering because, once you have your protocol, once you know the massage techniques, you don't have to see a specialist every other week. I mean, you can still have like a monthly treatment with a professional, but this is also something that you can really do yourself to support your fertility, your detoxification processes. So there was a lot of information. That's why I created this PDF. To summarize, these EDCs, they harm not only your fertility, but they can impact your future child's reproductive capacity as well. EDCs are all around us, so you'll never be able to completely eliminate your exposure to them. So don't let perfection become the enemy of the good. But 3 ways to start limiting your exposure to EDCs are to regularly clean the air that you breathe. Just clean your house, basically. Be mindful of what you eat, of what you put on your skin, and what you clean your house with. And you want to be on the lookout for anything that's scented, that's plastic, especially plastic that's being heated, anything that's non-stick or water repellent, canned foods, and just anything that contains chemicals, especially when it comes to skincare or cleaning supplies. And then in addition, you can improve your body's detoxification capacity by sweating more. Sweating is a good one. Making sure you drink enough water, but also by developing a daily abdominal massage practice. If you've made it to the end of this podcast, thanks so much for listening. Again, I know it was a lot of information, so you can head over to thatfertilefeeling.com/chemicals, where you can download the PDF action plan to clean your environment and limit the effects of these EDCs on your health, your fertility, and your offspring. I would love to hear from you what your main takeaway was from this episode. I love any reviews that you leave me. And this is I should have started with this. This is the final weekend where you can leave a review, send me a screenshot, and then I'm giving away 1 free private coaching session. So if you want to enter, send me your review. You can email me at francoise@thatfertilefeeling.com, message me on Instagram @thatfertilefeeling, screenshot your review on Apple Podcasts, or give me 5 stars on Spotify and send me a screenshot of that as well. And that's how you can enter. I will draw the lucky winner next week on July 1st. privately, I will let you know if you won, because I know not everyone wants to be outed on social media as, being interested in fertility. Thanks so much for listening. Also, reach out to me if you have any other questions or comments. And I hope to see you back in 2 weeks' time, as it's the summer. The summer season is upon us, so I'm slowing down a little bit. Take care.